Hello everybody, you're listening to Polymath radio show with your host, Daniel Aaron Levy. I am very excited to be here. This is my first time live on air, if you can't tell by the technical issues and all that. So I hope everything's working now. I am currently corresponding with some anonymous sources on Snapchat and WhatsApp just to see if everything's working out okay. But okay, someone's just said, perfect, can hear you, King. Thanks, Aaron, lots of love. So, looks like we're all sorted now. I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time on air. Just to give some information about who I am, my name is Daniel Aaron Levy, in case the intro didn't make clear. And I'm a third-year med student at the Uni of Bristol. I'm taking a year out to intercalate. Just as some that is, in medicine, intercalation is when you take a year out of doing medicine and you just like speed run another degree. You get like a whole another degree. You just compress it into a year. And I'll be doing that next year with psychology, so I won't be in Bristol. So that may mean this radio show won't go on for next academic year because I'll be in Liverpool. But until then, I'm here every Saturday. There was an issue with timing. There was some kind of misunderstanding with the timings and all that stuff. So for today, I've been relegated to 7 p.m. But normally, it should be at 6 p.m. So I will let you guys know though. I'll keep you guys all updated. So there'll be no more issues with timing and all that. So let me just explain what this radio show is all about. I keep saying like podcast by accident, but it's not a podcast, it's a radio show. So, Polymath. What actually is a polymath? It's not necessarily related to mathematics, despite the name. Polymath comes from the Greek words poly, meaning many, and mathema. Mathema means, I think it technically means that which is learned, but in a less literal sense, it means study or science. So a polymath refers to a person who has a really wide range of knowledge and who's skillful in lots of different academic fields. So for example, or not just academic fields, but any kinds of fields of knowledge. So for example, Leonardo da Vinci is a great example of a polymath. He was a writer, an inventor, a scientist, a theorist, an artist. That is classic polymath material. Now, just as a little disclaimer, I am not claiming that I am a polymath. I am not claiming that you will all become polymaths as a result of listening to this podcast. I'm not going to be egotistical to compare myself to Leonardo da Vinci. But I've called it polymath because I think it fits the show, and I really like the idea of a polymath. I've always been interested in kind of reading on lots of different subjects and getting breadth of knowledge as well as just depth of knowledge. And I've kind of seen myself as someone who thrives in a bit more of a generalist kind of vibe than a specialist vibe. I do like learning about different things and in detail as well. But for me, it's about the variety. I like learning about lots of different fields and seeing how they all interact. And in this series, we're going to be talking about a lot of different academic, not just academic, but just fields of knowledge in general. We're going to be talking about psychology. We're going to be talking about evolutionary biology, anthropology, politics, economics, history, loads more as well. Lots and lots of broad fields of knowledge that I think you guys will find really interesting. And specifically, we're going to be talking about topics within these fields that I think you guys will find interesting. And I think that you guys will be able to apply to kind of daily life as well. The idea is that I talk about stuff that I find interesting and that you might find interesting as well. But because it's applicable, it almost kind of takes the form of life advice as well. That may be potentially midlife advice. I'm not going to toot my own horn here. But life advice it will be nonetheless. So that's kind of what the concept of this radio show really is. And just talking about structure for a second, you see, I am quite an experienced yapper, but I've never timed myself yapping before. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to say in the space of an hour. And it's not as if I haven't done any kind of practice or rehearsal for this, but what I'm saying today is unscripted because I don't like the idea of just reading off a script. I like the kind of dynamism and the excitement that kind of just, not spitballing it, but just saying words as they come into my head brings. I do have notes here just to add a little bit of structure, but what I'm trying to say is I'm not sure exactly how much I'll be able to cover in the space of this hour. This is my first time live on air, so I'm gonna have to see what works, what doesn't. What I'm thinking of is in this topic, I'm gonna be, in this kind of episode, I'm going to be talking about evolutionary biology and anthropology to answer the question, why is it so hard to stay in shape? And once I kind of finish talking about that, if I have more time remaining, which I imagine I will, I'll be talking about how you guys can stay healthier, some nutrition advice, exercise advice, lifestyle advice, what to do, what to avoid, what's a green flag, what's a red flag, and how to find accurate nutrition and health-based information online. If I've got even more time, I'll talk about hunter-gatherers and the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. That might sound a little bit out of left field, but you will see, it will all come in handy. Sorry about that little rattle there. This mic is extraordinarily sensitive. That is the sound of a pair of headphones rattling on the table. And I was actually trying to play some music earlier, but there was some fuckery with the aux, I presume. I'm actually not allowed to swear on this. The student union has said I am not allowed to swear on this radio show. So student union, I'm so sorry. I'll try not to swear. It's kind of a part of my standard vocabulary, but I will try not to. Anyway, so hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and that leads into hunter-gatherer society, and then that kind of leads into some more broad anthropology stuff, but I'm reluctant to signpost exactly what that's going to be because I want to be a little surprise. I want to take you guys on a little journey of knowledge, if you see what I mean. And also, I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to get to it. But the fundamental question that I want to ask within this episode is, why is it so hard to stay in shape? Now, there are some people who are blessed and they'll eat what they want and do what they want, and they're still looking pretty hale and healthy. I'm not one of those people. I've had to watch my diet, I've had to watch my exercise levels, and it's a struggle which a lot of people can relate to. And in fact, issues with health, the reason why these fad diets and nutrition and diet culture is so common is because this is a recurrent theme. Why is it so hard for humans to stay in shape? And I could say some stuff about, how you need to burn more calories than you consume in a day in order to lose weight, but nah! We're going to get deeper than that. We're going to get into evolution, we're going to get into anthropology, we're going to get into chimpanzees, we're going to get into early hominids. I'm going to give you guys a real answer for this. So, the first thing I would like to start with is, if I could kindly ask you guys, maybe if you've got Google near you, if you're willing to Google something, if you're not willing to Google something, you don't have to. I hate to be giving you guys chores, but I think you'll enjoy this particular chore. Go and Google search a hairless chimpanzee. You heard me right, I'm not yapping. Well, I am yapping, but it is sensible yapping. Go and Google search a hairless chimpanzee. Now, if you've done that, or if you haven't done that, you don't have to do what you want to do. You'll notice that chimpanzees are jacked. They're huge. Their muscles are vast. And also, chimpanzee muscles, pound for pound, are stronger than human muscles. That's a very important point. And it's not just chimpanzees as well. Primates in general, you will see, are jacked. Gorillas can throw up to 500 kilos, for example, which is wild. That's like over 1,000 pounds. I think that's like 1,100 pounds. One thing I did want to say before getting into this, I've just looked at my notes and realized that I haven't mentioned this. I want to give another disclaimer. This is not an academic radio show. I'm not a professional. I'm not an expert. I'm a guy who finds this stuff interesting and has read about it extensively and who has researched it extensively, but I don't have formal qualifications. I'm going to be speaking in a colloquial and conversational style. This is not academic. I just want to make that crystal clear for everyone. But that doesn't mean that what I have to say might not be of value to you guys. I'm doing this whole radio show because I think it is interesting. I think it can help you guys. That's an important thing for me to say as well. So, hairless chimpanzees. Let's talk about it. Right, so, gorillas, they're vast. Chimpanzees, they're jacked as well. But I want to ask you guys this. Why are primates so jacked? Like, if you look at a hairless chimpanzee, if you will, look at an image of that. They're vast. Why? Why is that? How are they building this muscle? Because it's not as if they're hitting the gym. It's not as if they're lifting weights. Now you could say, well, Daniel, primates live very active lives. They're swinging from trees. They're fighting each other. If you're a gorilla, they're like pounding their hands against the ground and all. That takes effort. It does take effort. It's true. But if you look at the muscle mass of a chimpanzee and consider that chimpanzee muscle, pound for pound, is stronger than human muscle, to me, it's quite clear that swinging around and occasionally getting into fights is nowhere near enough of an exercise stimulus to develop those kinds of muscles. You do not need to be gargantuan to swing from tree to tree. You need to be strong, but not colossal. You don't need to throw 500 kilos in order just to shift your body weight from tree to tree. And you can say, well, chimpanzees and gorillas are quite combative. They fight all the time. And they do fight all the time. It's kind of their thing. Seriously, chimpanzees, brutal. Anyway, but those fights are not regular enough to build up muscle ready like that. Like, if you're having a sporadic, like, say if you're out there, you're on the streets in Bristol, you're sporadically fighting people, don't know why you do that, but if you do decide to do that, that's not going to be enough to build muscle. It's not regular exercise. So this leaves us with a conundrum. Why are these primates so jacked? But there is a way that we can solve this conundrum. Because you see, we're looking at this issue through the lens of human physiology. Now, with human beings, most of the time, muscle mass growth is exercise-induced. I mean, there are some exceptions. So, for example, when males go through puberty, they do tend to just kind of build muscle mass without that stimulus of exercise. But still, for human beings, muscle is stimulated through that, like the behavioral stimulus of exercise. It doesn't just happen, right? But with animals, it's different. You see, with human beings, you don't just build muscle passively. Let's say you take in more calories in a day than you burn, but what will happen is you build fat. You don't build muscle passively, you build fat passively. Whereas with some animals, not all animals, let's not make any overgeneralizations here, but with some animals it's different. By just intaking a calorie surplus, they will build muscle passively rather than build fat passively, which means that they're jacked. But the jackness of these primates is out of proportion with the amount of exercise they're doing, because exercise is not the stimulus for that muscle mass being built. That muscle mass is just being built normally. Now you might be thinking, well damn, that sucks. So we don't build muscle passively, but we build fat passively? It's terrible. And yes, in the modern world where calories are very readily available and beauty standards are focused on having low amounts of body fat and for males high amounts of muscle, it can be quite annoying. Hence the central paradox of why it is hard to stay in shape. But there is a reason why humans have evolved this way. It's not just, because that's the thing, it's an L now that we have unlimited calories, but for all of human evolution up until recent centuries, it hasn't been like that at all. You see, if you're a hunter-gatherer, right, and I'm not just talking Homo sapiens here, I'm talking all other hominids, all other related species, that whole kind of evolutionary ladder from chimpanzees to humans, we're all in the same boat here, roughly, wherein calories are scarce. So it's good to build fat because it's like an energy reserve, you know? So for example, let's say you have a day where you don't catch any food, that's fine, you don't starve to death because you've got reserves of fat. So your body doesn't need to start eating your muscles and your organs. That also raises the question, why is it hard for humans to build muscle? Because muscles are very energetically expensive. You see, muscles take calories every day just to maintain. Now, people will often refer to metabolism. You say, oh, my metabolism's so slow, I gain weight so quickly. Well, let's say you see a mate who just like scrans 50 milkshakes and gains no kilos. You say, oh, his metabolism's really fast. What we really mean when we say that, sorry about that, is that damn, I had a protein shake earlier today. Playing havoc with my digestive system right now. Anyway, what we really mean when we say that is basal metabolic rate. And your basal metabolic rate is just basically how many calories do you burn each day by just existing. How many calories does it take to just maintain your body, to just run the operations? Even if you sat in a chair all day and did nothing, you didn't even think, it was just TV static up there. How many calories would you burn just by doing that? That is your basal metabolic rate. And when you build muscle, it increases your basal metabolic rate. So muscle is an energetically expensive tissue, which means if you're a hunter-gatherer, you're on the plains of whatever, you're hunting food, you don't want to be burning calories unnecessarily, you need that. So you don't, as a human, you don't want to build muscle unless you don't want to build muscle unless it's necessary. Because when you build muscle, that's spending calories. So if it's necessary, then your body's like, well, fine. I'll build up the muscle so we can do the stuff that we need to do. But if it's not necessary, your body's like, well, I'm not going to build muscle at all. But I'm aware that this might be a little bit confusing because you're thinking, well, Daniel, you're telling me that it's disadvantageous for human beings to build muscle because it's energetically expensive and it reduces our calorie. It kind of increases the amount of calories we need. But surely this applies to animals as well. I mean, animals need to conserve calories too, right? So why is it that these animals, like chimpanzees and gorillas, I'm using these animals as examples purely because they're primates and they're more similar to us. Obviously, there are other animals that exist. But you may be thinking, Daniel, why is it that you're saying, oh, human beings don't want to build muscle, but surely that should apply to animals too? Well, here's the difference. The niche of chimpanzees and gorillas is that they need to be very strong, Not just for these animals, but for animals like, I don't know, tigers, lions, all these other animals that passively build muscle. Their evolutionary niche relies on having a high physical strength. They need that to survive. They're strength hunters. It would be like, for example, a cheetah. The whole evolutionary niche of a cheetah is being able to run very fast. Like a peregrine falcon. The whole evolutionary niche of a peregrine falcon is to be able to dive very quickly. And even if an adaptation is energetically expensive, evolution will give that adaptation if it's necessary for survival. So for example, peacocks. Peacocks have really colourful feathers. Now, they have like a really large, colourful plumage. That requires energy to maintain. That's calories. You may be thinking, damn, those are precious calories. Why are those peacocks doing it? Well, natural selection isn't an idiot. Peacocks do it because it's necessary for survival. Because having large, ornate plumages as a peacock is a sexual selection trait. So if you're a male peacock, by the way, female peacocks, also known as peahens, fun fact, don't have colourful feathers. They have completely brown feathers. And I'll explain why. Because for the male peacocks, having that bright, colourful plumage is an essential survival tactic because it induces females to mate with them. So female peahens are like, damn, he got that plumage going on. And then they mate with them, and then that's how male peacocks reproduce and propagate their genes. So without a colourful plumage, which is calorifically expensive, they don't propagate their genes. So as a result, you have this calorifically intensive adaptation, but it makes sense why natural selection has implemented that feature, let's say, because it's necessary for that animal's survival. Now, I'm aware we've digressed from humans quite a bit here, but don't worry. It'll all make sense. You see, whereas the evolutionary niche of chimpanzees and gorillas requires quite high strength, the evolutionary niche of humans is specifically based around both intelligence and the consequent tool making that comes from that, and endurance. You see, Homo sapiens didn't just pop into existence from chimpanzees immediately. There was a large kind of journey where we went from these more simple primates to advanced Homo sapiens. And on the way, humans' capacity to make tools, work together, their intelligence began to increase gradually. But there would have been a stage in that process, let's say the earliest hominids. So for example, Australopithecus. Australopithecus is, I believe, a genus. I'm not actually sure. It's poor from me. So you have hominids, which are organisms of the genus Homo. I think, anyway, I'm going to look that up because I don't want to give you guys any misinformation. And then you have Australopithecines. Pithecines, yeah. Nah, I was wrong. Poor form from me. Hominids are not just organisms of the genus of Homo, never mind. But, anyway, Australopithecines, pithecines, are a type of organism that kind of bridge the gap between the Homo genus, so like Homo habilis, Homo neanderthalis, Homo florenziensis, Homo sapiens, etc., etc., and those chimpanzees. And those earliest Australopithecines, they weren't super intelligent. I mean, they would have been more intelligent than chimpanzees, of course, but their tool-making capacity wasn't yet that spectacular. It takes a while. I mean, I think tool-making only really took off with Homo habilis. And if you think of like the span of time between chimpanzees and Homo sapiens, Homo habilis is pretty recent on that time span. So there are lots of organisms kind of between those points who couldn't just rely on tool-making and intelligence for survival. And the key hominid method of like our evolutionary niche is endurance. We can't run faster than a deer, for example. We can't out-wrestle a mammoth, but we can outrun them and just tire them out. So you see, the ancestors of Homo sapiens, millions and millions of years ago, in order to hunt, they would find a prey animal, let's say a deer, a gazelle, or an antelope, what have you, and they would just chase it, and they would keep on chasing it until that animal could not run anymore and just dropped from exhaustion, and then that human ancestor would pull up and just club it to death or something. So what I'm trying to say is endurance and the ability for stamina, the ability to do long, prolonged feats of activity rather than short bursts of activity is what sets hominids apart. That is our evolutionary niche. We were endurance hunters. And I mean, you still see it today, even with Homo sapiens, hunter-gatherers, and more recent kind of species related to humans. Yes, we use tools, yes, we're intelligent, yes, we coordinate and develop strategies, but endurance is still a really important part of the hunter-gatherer playbook here. Homo sapiens are still by nature endurance hunters. We are made to fill an endurance niche. Obviously, after agriculture came along and now we're living in an industrialized society, we're not hunting animals on the regular to get food. But if that were the current situation, our ability for endurance would be essential for that. And if you read books on modern hunter-gatherer tribes, so for example, the Kung is one of them, the is expressed as an exclamation mark, by the way. So if you look up exclamation mark, K-U-N-G, that's a hunter-gatherer tribe, which a lot of research has been done on. So if you look at modern hunter-gatherer tribes like the Kung or the Hadza tribe, there's a bunch of others as well, but I'm just forgetting their names at the moment. Endurance, and if you kind of listen to descriptions of how they hunt, endurance is really important here. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself so much. I just want to make sure I'm not confusing anyone or anything. I'm not looking at my phone or anything or receiving any feedback from what I'm saying right now because I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to feel self-conscious or anything. So if I am moving at a too fast or too slow pace, I do apologize. I feel like it's probably better to move at a slightly slower pace than a too fast pace because I don't want to lose you guys. Hence why I've been emphasizing endurance. But what I'm trying to say is our evolutionary niche is endurance-based, which means that it's really, really important for human beings that we save all the calories we can. It's really important that we don't, by just taking in more calories in a day that we burn, it was really important for our hunter-gatherer ancestors that we build fat and not muscle. Because if we build fat, those are calorie reserves. See, hunting is it's not stable at all. I mean, I think like experienced hunter-gatherers, I don't remember the exact statistic, which is really annoying. But like hunter-gatherers nowadays will be bringing in kills, I think like once every few days or something. I'm not sure about that, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not like an everyday thing. No, damn it, I feel like it was less common than every few days even. Ignore that particular statistic because I don't have the memory of it to give you an accurate answer. But what I'm trying to say is hunting is not a stable occupation, which means that it's really, really important to build fat and have fat reserves because there will be days as a hunter that you're going hungry. So, and of course humans were hunter-gatherers, we weren't just hunters, but hunting is still an important source of protein and gathering might not be too secure an occupation either. Gathering is generally a more surefire way of obtaining calories than hunting. It's more steady, you're more likely to get calories, but still, there's still inherent risk in what you're doing. I mean, there might be climatic changes, there might be kind of, you exhaust your local environment, and therefore as a hunter-gatherer, you have to move to a different area of land where you haven't consumed all the natural resources. It's not that stable. So the ability to build fat reserves is very important here. Similarly, we don't want to build muscle unless we absolutely need to, which is why in almost all scenarios, apart from what I can think of male puberty, building muscle in human beings is exercise induced. Because your body's like, damn, if we need to build these muscles, if we're really doing this kind of stuff, I'll build muscle. But as soon as you stop exercising, as soon as we no longer need to have this muscle, I'm gonna break this muscle down because it's taking up calories. It's also why, I mean, if there's any gym lads listening, I'm not really sure who will be listening. I'm not even sure if anyone is listening at this point, but if there are any gym lads listening at the moment, there is a concept in weightlifting called progressive overload. I mean, to be fair, many of you guys may have heard of this concept. And it's basically saying that if you want to build muscle, you have to keep taxing them more and more and more. Because let's say you do 100 push-ups every day. Initially your body's like, damn, we're doing 100 push-ups every day, I need to build up some muscle, I need to cope with this. But eventually, your body will build enough muscle to comfortably cope with being able to do 100 push-ups a day, and then your body will not build up any more muscle. Because your body doesn't want to. Your body's thinking, I say thinking, obviously your body doesn't think, but evolution has shaped your body to act according to the principle of, listen, I have enough muscle to perform this task, I'm not going to build any more muscle because it's calorific waste. And it's very interesting because it's how humans evolve, but there's in this modern world, now that we have access to an abundance of calories, as long as we can keep securing those calories, there's nothing wrong with having a high muscle mass. It's not as if it's like bad. It's just that we as human beings evolved and we've adapted to a world where calories are scarce and you've got to conserve that. Whereas now the situation is completely different. Calories are abundant. So for example, there's this chemical, I think it's a hormone, let's just say chemical, in the human body called myostatin, right? Myo, by the way, is a prefix meaning muscle. Statin, as in stationary, means stop. And by the way, myostatin isn't just found in human bodies. So let's say you cut into a steak. You know when you cut into a steak and that like red juice comes out and you're like, oh, it's blood. It's not blood. It's the protein that is myostatin. So it exists in animals as well. I'm not sure. I think it exists in different animals in different populations because the role of myostatin is actually to restrict muscle growth. I'll explain why in a minute. So I do think different animals have myostatin in different concentrations because, as I've mentioned, different animals have different evolutionary niches where strength is of varying importance. But the role of myostatin in the human body is to basically act as a brake to building muscles. It's basically, myostatin is one of the many mechanisms our body uses to prevent just building muscle passively. So for example, everything I've been saying about how just having a calorie surplus in a day isn't enough to build muscle, and it has to be exercise induced as well, you need exercise as a stimulus. Myostatin is part of the reason why you won't just build muscle passively, right? But there is a medical condition called myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy. And it's when human beings suffer from a deficiency of myostatin. It's just a congenital. So congenital means with birth. So you're born with a deficiency of myostatin. And these individuals grow up to have a really high muscle mass and a really low body fat percentage. So actually, if I can ask you guys to Google something again real quick, if you just Google myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy, you'll see pictures of people looking jacked. But the difference is, those people don't need to go to the gym to be jacked. They're just doing it. And that's because one of the brakes on passive muscle growth has been removed. So as long as these people are receiving a calorie surplus, they will build muscle passively. And because muscle is energetically expensive and requires calories to maintain, they have less body fat percentage as well. Because those fat reserves are being constantly consumed in order to sustain that muscle mass. And by the way, you can induce this mutation in organisms. So a team of Chinese researchers actually induced this mutation in a beagle, and that beagle became jacked, became a vast beagle. Because again, one of the brakes to passive muscle growth had just been knocked out. Theoretically, you could do this on humans as well. You could genetically engineer humans to have myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy, but shouldn't, because it's very unethical. But you could, is what I'm trying to say. And in fact, Eddie Hall, actually, I don't know if you guys have heard of Eddie Hall, he's a powerlifter. He actually has myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy. So, fun fact. So, that kind of explains one of the reasons why staying in shape is hard. Why is it that humans build fat and it's a pain in the ass to build muscle? But there is another thing that we need to mention here. Eating healthy is hard. We like foods that are bad for us. We like sugary foods. We like processed foods. We like fatty foods. We love that kind of stuff. What we don't really like too much is protein. So I don't know if you guys have ever had protein shakes. Most protein shakes are ass. They are not that nice at all. Now, my uncle may be listening to this as a child. I've been trying to get my uncle on protein shakes, and I recommended it to him. And initially he was like, oh yeah, it's great, I love it. And now he's so anti-protein shake because he thinks it just tastes ass. Well, don't worry, Jonathan, there's an evolutionary reason for it. So, as I'm saying, eating healthy is hard. Why is it that we like sugar? Why is it that we like fats? Because sugar and fats provide lots of calories per gram. So, a gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 calories. A gram of fat gives you a crazy 9 calories. And then a gram of protein, to my knowledge, gives you either 2 or 3 calories. I think it's 2. But more importantly, sugar is quite rare. You don't really, as a hunter-gatherer, you're not getting a huge amount of sugar in your diet. You get sugar from fruits, which is very important. But you're not getting sugar from animal meat or anything. You're not getting it from nuts. You're not getting it from leaves or forage or tubers or roots. But sugar is something that our bodies really need. So as a result, what your body... See, humans have evolved for hunter-gatherer lifestyles. So our body's incentives and pleasure mechanisms are adapted for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So the reason why we love sugar, for example, is because sugar is quite rare in nature, but we need sugar. So our body really rewards us for eating sugar by releasing a bunch of dopamine in order to encourage us to keep eating sugary foods. Because your body's like, yes, sugar, we need this, keep going. What your body doesn't realize, because your body is adapted to a hunter-gatherer existence, is that now we have an abundance of sugar. So that's actually a really, really maladaptive trait. That's not good. But yeah, in a hunter-gatherer state of nature, back before, I don't know, Haribos, your main source of sugar was fruits. And actually, what's interesting is that animals which predominantly eat fruits as part of their diet, frugivores, as they're called, which include primates and elephants, tend to be some of the most intelligent kinds of animals, which I just think is quite interesting. So frugivores, shout out to fruit. And it's a similar thing with fat, by the way, and it's a similar thing with salt. Humans like eating salt because salt is actually quite rare. It's not that common in nature, but we need the electrolytes sodium and chlorine that comprise salt, especially sodium. Sodium is really important for the human body. So as a result, we've adapted to really like the taste of salt. It's the same with fat. We get loads of calories per gram from fat. So we love that. We love a bit of fat. So every time you eat these food groups, your brain releases dopamine because it's rewarding you from doing that. The reasons why your brain releases dopamine, by the way, that's an evolutionary mechanism to encourage behaviors that were good for survival as hunter-gatherers. So dopamine release, it's basically just your brain saying, yes, keep doing that. That will help us survive, and that will help us pass on our genes. So eating sugary foods, your body rewards you with dopamine because your body's like, damn, we need this for survival, and we're going to reward you for doing this so that you keep doing it. It's the same thing with sex. Sex feels great because it's your body releases dopamine to reward you for propagating your genes. Remember, that's all evolution cares about. It's for an organism to survive so that they can spread their genes. That just has to be, by logic, how evolution works, right? Like, of course, the only thing evolution selects for is to just pass on your genes, because that is literally the whole process of natural selection. So, dopamine release in the brain is geared towards that kind of vibe. But as I said, it's geared towards a hunter-gatherer existence. So your brain releases dopamine to reward you for shitty foods because that's what you needed as a hunter-gatherer. Hence why we enjoy eating foods that are bad for us. And it's also why processed foods are particularly bad for us, but also particularly good. Because processed foods are foods that have been modified to just cram a bunch of shit in there. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. Cram a bunch of sugar and fat and salt. The idea being that you love eating them because your brain releases a ton of dopamine for it. But of course it's terrible for you. I mean, everyone knows that. But it's really hard to resist because your brain's churning out dopamine for you doing that. So if you guys have had a Domino's pizza, for example, Domino's tastes great. Like, I love the taste of Domino's. But the reason why I love the taste of Domino's is not because it's quality food. It's quite the opposite. It's because they just cram like salt and sugar and fat in there. And that's why I like the taste of it. Because my brain is like, ooh, we need this for survival. Let's go, dopamine. But it doesn't realize that the modern world has thrown all of these adaptations out of whack. And it's why cardiovascular disease is the main killer in UK society at the moment. Cardiovascular disease, by the way, is disease involving your heart and your blood vessels. Because if you do have too much sugar and too much fat, that actually has loads of negative consequences for your body. That's really bad. That's a whole nother thing to get into, which I won't get into here. But basically, like, our bodies have evolved with the assumption that calories are going to be scarce. We're not really well prepared for what happens when calories are abundant and we're having loads of them. Which is why cardiovascular disease is so prevalent in modern society. Because our body just hasn't evolved to deal with it. So what I'm trying to say to you is, why is it hard to stay in shape? Because we like shitty foods. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. I'm saying sorry. I mean, I'm guessing you guys don't care. I mean, all the people who are listening to this realistically are people who I've sworn in front of in the past. I'm really apologising to the student union here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, student union. Anyway. Yeah. So, we like eating foods that are bad for us, and exercise is a pain to build muscle, and losing fat is a pain. But this also has quite important implications for self-discipline. And I'll explain why in a moment. You see, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the book Thinking Fast and Slow, right? So it's a book by these two guys, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Really, really famous researchers, really, really well known, a lot of clout, you could say. And the whole premise of Thinking Fast and Slow is that the brain has two systems of thought. System one, which is impulsive, intuitive, it's been honed by millennia of evolution of instinct. And system two, which is slow, it's rational, it's deliberative. It's where our kind of conscious thought comes into play. Whereas system one is like our urges, our desires. And the idea of system 1 and system 2 have echoes in the history of psychology. So, for example, Freud talked about the id, the ego, and the superego, where the id is the component of the psyche concerned with our base impulses, our urges, our instincts, what we want and what we want now. That would roughly correspond to system 1. Whereas the ego and superego is like our conscious... So the ego, is like our... Sorry, let me explain. Let me rewind. Our superego is kind of like our... What's the word? Inhibition. It's our conscious. It's our kind of thing. It's our break on impulsive behavior. It's our kind of better nature. It's our moral nature. But it's also our kind of nature which is concerned with consequences and decision making and weighing up what's going on. The ego is the component of the psyche which reconciles these two things. It's your conscious self thinking, right, how can I gratify my desires? How can I do what I want to do in a way which doesn't have deep consequences, for example? So the id here corresponds to Kahneman and Tversky's system 1 of thought, whereas the ego and superego correspond to system 2 of Kahneman and Tversky's system of thought. Now, if you want to go back even further, the Buddha used a metaphor for psychology, which I really, really like. And the metaphor is that, like, the human psyche is like a rider on an elephant. And the rider represents system 2 of thought. It's like our conscious, deliberative self. It's our willpower. It's our volition. It's what we want. It's what we're thinking right now. It's our conscious thinking mind. The elephant is like system 1 of thought. It's our impulses. It's our urges. It's stuff that, like, it isn't even fully conscious, fully articulated. It's just what our body wants. Why am I telling you all of this? Because it has quite important ramifications for self-discipline and therefore for staying in shape. You see, the system 1 of thought, that immediate short-term form of thought, is powerful. It's really difficult to resist. I mean, everyone's been in a situation in their lives where they've done something that they know they shouldn't because they just couldn't resist doing it. That's human nature. Now, you see, in the Victorian era, the conception of self-discipline was just, you need to have an iron will and suppress all the impulses that you're thinking through sheer force of strength. It's not actually like that, because once you understand how systems 1 and 2 of thought work, we can kind of game the system. So let's say you're at home, you're craving some snack food, because of course you're craving some shitty snack food that's bad for your health. It's what evolution's coded you to do. Now, let's say you have chocolate in the house, right? You're going to be drawn to that. It's going to be really difficult to resist system 1. Here's an important thing to understand as well. Our impulses, that elephant, that system 1, that id, it's just going constantly. It's infinite. It's always in the back of our mind. Whereas to suppress that, so our system 2 of thought, our willpower, our rider in the Buddhist metaphor, that takes energy, that takes willpower. And human beings have a finite amount of willpower. I mean, this is something that I'm sure you guys have found out simply by living life, but it's also something that's been confirmed by studies. Humans have a finite willpower. So the key thing to self-discipline is to just make being healthy as easy as possible. Make it as low effort as possible. Tax your willpower as little as possible. Because if you've got like chocolate or snacks in the house, you don't want to eat that. And it's going to be constant effort suppressing the urge to do so. By the way, I'm not saying you should never treat yourself or you should never indulge yourself. I'm saying this all with the implicit assumption that you don't want to give in to this system 1 of behavior. There is nothing wrong with indulging yourself, having a little chocolate snack, just to be clear here. But anyway, moving on. What would be much better is if, while you're at the grocery store and you weren't immediately hungry, so you kind of had a bit more control over your system 1 of thought, you just bought a bunch of healthy snacks. Like, let's say you get some carrots or some nuts or whatever, and you take them home. And then that way, when you're craving stuff and you're really hungry and you want some chocolate, you don't have that shit in the house. You got to go out to the supermarket to buy chocolate. Meanwhile, you've got healthy snacks just next door. And then you're way more likely to stick to your goals. And by the way, this principle, many of you guys may already be doing this and be thinking, well, that's not really great advice, Daniel, because no shit, Sherlock. Like, if you want to keep in shape, obviously you shouldn't buy junk food in the house. But what I'm saying is you can and should apply that principle to everything. Self-discipline is not just about having an iron will, although of course you do need willpower. It's really about making what you want to do as easy for yourself as possible. And this is why, by the way, habits, like people always say, oh, going to the gym is really hard, but once you get into the habit of it, it's easier. Is because once you get in the habit of it, it just becomes more natural to you. Like your system one, your instinct is like, this is a habit, this is a routine, we're going to go do this. It requires less willpower. It requires less system two of thought to force yourself to go to the gym. Because it's already been coded in the kind of deeper parts of your psyche that's just something you're going to do. It's just a habit that you have. So anyway, just a moment on self-discipline. That's a little bit psychological. We haven't really talked too much about psychology in this episode. I love psychology. So in future episodes, we're going to be getting really deep into psychology. We're going to be getting balls deep into psychology. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Student union, please don't kick me off the show. But anyway, for now, we're going to leave it there. And I want to give you guys a bit of nutrition advice as well. I'm only at 15 minutes, which is wild. I thought, damn. Dude, I thought I'd be done with all this stuff in like 20 minutes. That's wild. Some grade A yapping going on here. That's crazy. So some nutrition advice. What should you eat? What should you avoid eating? When you look at a nutritional label, you get a bunch of stuff. You'll see like total calories, total fats, and then you get a breakdown of that. Unsaturated fat, saturated fat, trans fat. You'll also get protein count, carbohydrate count, and that carbohydrate count will be broken down into complex carbohydrates, like fiber and sugar. And then you'll also get like salt. Now, obviously it's quite difficult for me to describe a nutritional label for you. I recommend, if you've got access to Google or anything like that, just looking up a nutritional label. Or hey, if you're near some food, if you're near a supermarket, go and pick up something off the shelf and just look at the label. But the core thing of what you want to do here is minimize the amount of saturated fats and sugar that you're eating in your foods, maximize the amount of protein you're eating in your foods, and unsaturated fat and complex carbohydrates are kind of like, they're fine. I wouldn't worry about that too much. And what's important here is like protein, by the way, is the most satiating macronutrient. Protein is really filling. So it's good to maximize on protein because it will fill you up and you're not getting that many calories from it. So you're not going to gain that much weight. More nutritional information in a moment. Just to go on a tangent, what actually is a macronutrient? A macronutrient is just a kind of nutrient that we can get energy from. So carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and fun fact, alcohol. Alcohol is also a kind of macronutrient. And in fact, I think like a gram of ethanol gives you 8 calories or something wild. Just to orient you guys, a gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 calories. So I'm just going to look up a gram of, how many calories in a gram of ethanol? Let's look at that. 7 calories per gram. 7 calories per gram for alcohol. That's almost as many as a gram of fat, and that's nearly twice as many as a gram of carbohydrate. So alcohol is a macronutrient. This is why beer, part of the reason why beer belly is a thing, because that beer, not only are you having the calories from like the sugar or the carbohydrates in that drink, but alcohol itself is a form of energy. It is a macronutrient. Whereas micronutrients are stuff like vitamins, mineral ions, etc., etc., etc. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be talking about macronutrients today. So nutrition advice. Unsaturated fats are actually pretty good for you. And they're found in like plant-based foods generally, like avocado, nuts, oily fish. These are all fats, like they're unsaturated fats, but they're good fats, which you may have heard just in like colloquial medical speak. You may have heard people say, oh, there's good fats and bad fats. The good fats are unsaturated fats. They tend to be found in plant foods. The bad fats are saturated fats. They tend to be found in animal foods. So don't let the word, see the word fat is quite stigmatized in modern Western society, and it's quite a thing in diet culture, but fat is not really, it's not the problem here. You need fats. Fats are good. And also, more importantly, by having avocados and nuts and oily fish, like, you're not going to get obese. Like, if you go to an obese person and you're like, oh, dude, what are you eating? No, but they're not going to be like, mate, I've been going crazy on the avocados recently. Of course, that does stand within reason. Fats are still fats. You will still get calories from them. But if you want to lose weight, if you want to keep a good shape, if you want to be healthy, unsaturated fats are fine. With carbohydrates as well, sugar here is really the issue. Complex carbohydrate isn't really the issue here. And I'll explain why that is in a moment. So for example, whole grain foods, like whole grain bread, whole wheat, whole grain rice, quinoa, stuff like that, that's fine. That's not really that bad for you. Obviously, you have to have it in moderation, but that's fine. Of course, white rice and like white bread are very different because that food, when it's white, it's been processed and a lot of the good stuff has been taken out and a lot of bad stuff has been added in. So generally, substitute like white rice for brown rice, white bread for brown bread, all that stuff. Yeah. And then fiber is also really good for you as well. Fiber won't actually give you calories because dietary fiber is a form of carbohydrate that you are unable to digest. Not you personally, it's that the human body can't digest it. That is what fiber is. That's the definition of it. It's carbohydrate that you can't digest. But it's still good. We still get lots of health benefits from it. It's really good for the GI tract as well. It just kind of helps everything run smoothly and all that. So by the way, if you have deficiency of fiber, you'll get constipated because it's just, you're not really getting that roughage that helps everything flow smoothly and all that stuff. But, so why am I telling you that complex carbohydrates aren't really your enemy, but sugar is? Because the reason why you gain weight from carbohydrates, or at least one of the reasons, is because insulin, right? So there's this thing called glycemic index, and it's a statistic which basically measures like how much, God, I'm kind of struggling to define it. It's just, maybe I should get an official definition up for you guys. I think that would be best because the words are fleeing me right now. And I just want to get as much information as possible. I mean, I'm not actually sure if anyone's still listening to this. I don't really mind either way. I kind of just enjoy the yapping. Yes, here we go. So, NHS definition. The glycemic index is a rating system for foods containing carbohydrates. It shows how quickly each food affects your blood sugar or glucose level when it's eaten. And this is important because increases in your blood sugar stimulate the release of insulin. And insulin is the hormone that drives fat into cells. Insulin plays a really, really key role in gaining weight here because that's the hormone that's driving fat into cells. Obviously, there's other factors at play. There's other stuff involved. This is not an academic podcast. It's a colloquial podcast, not podcast, radio station, sorry. And I'm oversimplifying stuff. But this is still very relevant. Insulin. And the more rapidly you spike your blood sugar, the more insulin your body will release, and the more fat will get driven into cells. You see, complex carbohydrates are called complex carbohydrates because they're made from lots of different units of sugar or glucose. I say sugar, generally people assume that glucose is like a verbose way of saying sugar. Sugar is an umbrella term. There's lots of different kinds of sugar molecules. So glucose, fructose, galactose, sucrose. Actually, sucrose is two together. I think galactose, sucrose is like two sugar units bound together. But sugar is an umbrella term, of which glucose is just one member. But what I'm trying to say is that carbohydrates consist of sugar units bound together. They're bonded. They're not, the sugar units aren't just like vibing about freely. Whereas in simple sugars, like when you look at a nutritional information label and it just says sugar 7 grams, that's 7 grams of free sugar. And free sugar, you eat that, glucose gets into your bloodstream, your body's like, damn, we got to counterbalance this, it releases a bunch of insulin, lots of fat gets driven into cells. But complex carbohydrates, which consist of lots of sugar units bound together, it takes a while for those bonds to be broken. So which means that the sugars that comprise that molecule get released into your bloodstream much more gradually. So there's not this kind of spike, this sudden spike in blood sugar. And that means that your body doesn't release so much insulin, and that means that your body doesn't drive so much fat into your cells, and that means that you don't put on as much weight. So glycemic index, it's a really good idea to just look up foods, check your kind of diet by the glycemic index vibe. So I mean, you'll generally find that like white bread will be quite high, whereas like, I don't know, healthier foods will be quite low. Glycemic index, sometimes the glycemic index can be like a bit skewed because there are some foods which are quite healthy, like fruits and veggies for example, which can rate quite high on the glycemic index, but they are still good for you. And that's because like along with the sugar in that fruit and vegetable, you're also getting like fiber and complex carbohydrates as well. So another statistic you can look up is glycemic load, which is basically like, it's glycemic index, but it's standardized for like the proportion of sugar in each food, which means that the glycemic load gives you a much more accurate index of like what to look at and what foods you should be eating. I mean, as a general rule, Nuts are very good. Avocados good. Whole grain foods, lots of fruit and veg, green stuff as well. Fruits are good. I mean, fruits do contain sugar, sort of grapes and oranges. They're nice because they're sugary, but fruits also contain a lot of good other stuff as well. And like, frankly, again, if you find an obese person on the street and you ask them what they're eating, they're not going to be like, yeah, man, I'm going crazy for oranges at the moment. Like, come on. So yeah. I'm trying to think of what other kind of food to recommend to you guys. Also, be careful when you're buying sauces and like dips, because a lot of the time there's loads of like calories and shitty food groups and sauces and dips as well. So just look at the label of what you buy and just think to yourself, I want to get saturated fats and free sugars low. I want to get protein high and unsaturated fats and complex carbohydrates. You know, it is what it is. And you should be cheating to maximize your fiber intake as well. And of course, for salt, obviously salt isn't good. Try and minimize your salt. You'll be getting enough salt from your diet anyway, so you don't need to worry about maximizing that. And yeah, nutrition advice, I want to warn you guys to stay away from alternative nutrition. So that's nutrition. So there's mainstream nutrition, which is science and it's backed up by evidence, and there's alternative nutrition, which is a whole academic field. I say academic, it's all pseudoscience, and it's just usually people trying to sell you stuff who will tell you false information about nutrition. They'll often point to like a specific scientific study about it. They'll find like 1 to 3 studies. That's because individual studies can often be wrong or misleading, or the methodology can be wrong, or you can be interpreting those results in the wrong way. So it's really, really easy to find a scientific paper or like 2 or 3 scientific papers and point to that as evidence for like whatever the hell you want to say. So just a warning, the company Optimum Nutrition, founded by a guy called Patrick Holford, he's written some books on nutrition. It's bullshit. It's alternative nutrition bullshit. It makes me really angry actually, because it's just peddling false information. Patrick Holford's whole game is recommending really, really high levels of vitamins. Levels of vitamins, by the way, that are actively harmful to you. So for example, the NHS says you shouldn't exceed more than 2 grams of vitamin C a day because it might be harmful. Patrick Holford is like, oh yeah, you can have vitamin C supplements to get 5 grams of vitamin C per day. Really harmful advice. And what do you know? He and his company, Optimum Nutrition, sell supplements for vitamins and minerals and all that. So if there's one thing I really want to instill you guys, mainstream science is not perfect, but alternative science is way, way worse. Please, please be mistrustful of alternative nutrition and just that kind of stuff. Mainstream science has its flaws, but it is still evidence-based, and you are required to prove stuff thoroughly and properly, and people will debate with you on it, and they will call you out on stuff you are doing wrong. So please don't endanger your health by listening to some con man. And finally, damn, dude, I have this whole other thing to say about hunter-gatherers and like hunter-gatherer lifestyle in societies. That'll be next episode, which I'm really, really excited for. Oh, that's going to be a fucking good one. See, this hasn't, I mean, I'm actually really excited. You guys are going to love this. This next episode, it's going to be about anthropology, going to be about politics, going to be about economics even in a little bit. Oh, you guys are going to love it. But I am running out of time, so I would close to say, using what we have learned, I can say, if you want to really focus on losing weight in the long term, building muscle is probably the best way to do it, because the more muscle you build, even if you're not exercising, simply having that muscle will increase your basal metabolic rate. Whereas let's say you run a mile every day, very admirable, and it will cause physiological changes. I mean, your body will produce more red blood cells, it will produce more alveoli in the lungs, and that will kind of help your endurance and your stamina. But let's say you run every day for a year, but then you stop for a week, most of those physiological adaptations go away. And it also means that, like, if you're running, yeah, there's some metabolic afterburn where your metabolism's higher just after a run for a brief period of time. But, like, if you run, you have a big run, 2 days later, there's no lasting benefit of that. Like, you're not increasing your basal metabolic rate. That's just like a one-time loss of calories. Whereas if you lift weights every day for like a year, and then you stop doing anything for like a week, not only will you still be retaining all that muscle mass, but for that whole time that you're not exercising, that you're not doing anything, you're still going to be losing weight passively because your basal metabolic rate is going to be higher. So that's just something to take away. Damn, I did not get through as much as I thought. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It means I have more to talk about for future episodes. And bam, next episode is going to be a juicy one. But listen, it's 7:58. This has been a blast. I'm so glad I'm doing this. I've always kind of fantasized about doing something like this, but never really gotten around to it. So I'm really happy. I don't know if anyone is still viewing at this point. If you are still viewing, lots of love to you. I mean, listening for an hour of me yapping, I'm really, really honoured. So whoever's listening to you, I love you, platonically. But anyway, thank you very much. And I will see you guys next week, which should be Saturday at 6. I'm not sure what's going on with the timetable. It seems like there was just a bit of a misunderstanding, which is really irritating. I mean, I hate to be telling you guys one thing and then giving you false information and updating the information the next minute. But it was completely out of my control. I wasn't even made aware of it. But yeah, anyway, lots of love to all of you. I'm really, really honoured that you guys would come here and listen to me talk about stuff I find interesting. I think actually I was meant to stop this at 7:55, but I'm not sure who is next after this. In fact, I'm not even sure if there is a spot next after this. So I think the protocol here is for me to play Bristol Community FM, just for people to listen to. So Burst Radio, when there doesn't have a slot on, I think just plays... Actually, someone's outside. Let me just ask. Yo, are you on next?
Yeah.
Alright, brilliant. Okay, turns out someone is on next, and I have overrun. So, I'm going to leave you guys here. It's been a real honour speaking to you guys today. And all the best, guys. Take care.